A master plan, what you'd be doing is, especially in the areas where septic systems are being used, is you're correcting a misjudgment of 40 years ago to allow high-density residential to be developed on septic systems. Septic systems in their right element are a wonderful treatment facility, and you cannot argue about them. And in some places, they're the answer. They're not the answer in clay, and they're not the answer in sand. There's going to be an impact on that, both environmentally and health. So that would be corrected if the service area is serviced. Failing septic systems. We know they're there. Even though you cannot see them, especially in sand, if you have a system that's been 25, 30 years old, and you still haven't got a problem with it, I tell you, it's not operating the way that it was designed. It's short-circuiting somewhere, and the sewage is going to a place that it's not meant to go. Also, with septic systems in sand, you're going to have a nutrient loading on the shallow aquifer. Taking tests, and I know that there's been tests done, and you know, some say, oh yeah, it's polluted, some say it's not, well, that's not really a problem, whatever. But when you start seeing nitrates and phosphates, you know, in an elevated range, you might not be picking up that same range in the lake shore, but it's all moving that way. So you really can't look at concentrations, you look at loading. And when that loading goes out there, it is impacting your shores. I don't think any of you that have been on the beaches over the last 10 years, you see those mats of algae rolling up on shore, and they're forming on shore. It's being impacted by the nutrients being there. Now you're going to certainly get some nutrients coming there from current action, you know, from creeks and whatever, but what you're finding is the algae blooms are right along the shoreline because they're nutrient rich, and it's coming from septic systems. The second point that I wanted to talk to is there's a program going on now. It's called Healthy Lake Huron, and it was initially the southeast basin of Lake Huron study looking at trying to find corrective actions for the algal blooms we're getting, the beach closures, the dead fish, the dead loons and cormorants and that coming up on shore. What's causing all this? So what's being done, and this study basically is from Tobermory down to Sarnia. Many parties are involved in this. It's our ministry, Environment Canada, Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Agriculture, is that they're looking at all the point sources, they're also looking at all the aquifers, they're looking at the watersheds that are being impacted, and they're looking at what are the sources of this. In the case of the area that was looked at in the master plan with the sewage treatment in the Grand Bend area, if that area was serviced with sanitary sewers, you're obviously removing a huge source that is going to be impacting the lake. Also, what you're going to be seeing there is, because of the nature of, I guess, more modern technology and reassessment on what is acceptable to discharge into a water course, you're looking at superior treatment enhancement with regards to the facility that you're going to be putting in. The compliance numbers that are used now on facultative lagoons is what Grand Bend has. Those are numbers that were developed probably in the 60s and 70s. You know, they were good numbers to use, but we're finding now that they're just not stringent enough. And you look at the, if you go into the environmental assessment report and look at the numbers that were given to what, you know, the plant has to meet here, they're factors of 10 lower than what you presently are deemed to be compliant with now. So you're going to see enhanced treatment, better quality. Taking that stretch of lakeshore, that's a huge chunk, and that can be done by having this project go there's another kicker here too. The federal government is implementing new regulations with regards to sewage treatment. What they're presently doing now is they're evaluating the performance of all sewage treatment plants across the country. And what they're also doing is, like I previously mentioned, they're looking at what these plants were judged against and what compliance numbers are considered to be acceptable. And there's a very strong chance that those numbers are going to be drastically reduced from any indication that I've had. They're not going to go up and they're not going to stay the same. They're going to be lower. And all I can say, if this project doesn't go through, that you could see sometime in the near future federal, provincial initiative to have existing sewage treatment plants meet these numbers. And if you're sitting there with facultative lagoons with no tertiary treatment on it, you're going to be directed to do that. And whether or not there's provincial or federal funding available, I couldn't answer that. One more comment. Future development, even though our ministry is we're there to protect the environment. With regards to future development, even though everyone wants to see it, good development, good sustainable development, it's really not a mandate of our ministry to promote that. But I tell you what we do is that if someone wants to develop something and they do not have the servicing there, then there will be a strong message sent to the approvers of this development that we do not agree at all and would strongly voice our opinion in opposition. So those are the points I want to make with regards to where our ministry is looking at this project. We want to see it go through, and we want to make sure that you guys don't lose that money too. So that's my points.
Question, we talked of alternatives, and that's the thing. What is the process? What would the process we would have to go through to provide with an alternative type of treatment, such as the biodigester or the blue frog? What's the process to get an approval for that? Would that meet the criteria of the ministry?
Well, what would happen is if, like, you've got an approved class environmental assessment document that has been approved, it's been concurred. This is what's going to be done. And actually, that document has to be in place before your actual certificate of approval is granted. That's the nuts and bolts. That's the legal document that says you are allowed to build this. This is how it's to be operated. These are the conditions you have to meet. Now, if you want to sway from that and change that, that document can stay there. I mean, it's not done if you don't do this. But if you want to look at something different, you got to re-enter that environmental assessment process. And a drastic change of that nature, I think you'd I wouldn't say you'd be starting at halfway through the project, because I think we realize the need is you basically be looking at alternatives again. Has something new come up in the last 4 or 5 years that wasn't looked at before? I know that in past situations where I've seen this happen before, where you're down to you're at 11:59. The money's there. Sign the document, and somebody comes up. Well, did you think about this? Where were you 7 years ago? Or yeah, we kind of looked at something like that before. We've got there's a process you have to go through here. You just can't introduce this. And what happens is, say this project's $25 million to do it. And someone says, well, I can do it for $4 million. That word gets out to the public. Everyone's going, why are we throwing away $21 million? Well, pardon me, it's pretty easy to come in at the end of a process and just make a comment on what you can do without it properly being evaluated by all the agencies, the technical people, and everyone having a kick at the cat. So that's the only thing I can say for that. If you're going to change this thing, you are going to take a lot more time to go through the process. It's not going to be expedited.
If septic systems are a concern, which I know they are, I'm on a fairly new one. It's quite a fancy one that we put in when we built our house. Why isn't there a mandate from the government that states septic systems have to be inspected now. I'm talking about in place at this point. Why if there's